Hello, everyone. Let me thank Nanette and Don for organizing this wonderful event and inviting me here. I'm very glad to talk to all of you. I've learned a lot during the past day from you, and I hope I can show you something a little bit useful today. So I'm from the new school, Schwartz Center for Economic Policy Research. We have a small lab there, a retirement equity lab, where we do research on how the retirement system is working or not working for people. So our focus is mostly on the system. But what I do on a day-to-day basis, I sit behind my computer and look at numbers. For the past year, I've been working with this huge data set from Social Security Administration, where I just see people's earning records day after day and look at their work history and how their life has changed through time. And by that, I'm trying to understand what's happening to people. And I'm going to share with you parts of my research and my other colleagues' research for the past 4 years that I've been engaged with this subject. And I hope you like parts of it, at least. So, most people, when they use the term crisis, they try to be dramatic. And especially these days, you hear it a lot. Whatever is happening, there's always a crisis. But what I mean by retirement crisis is not really the same type of crisis, because there is no sense of urgency. We do need some urgent measures to fix some of the problems. But this is the type of thing, this is the type of disaster that is accumulating through individuals' lives slowly. And as you have seen in the past two presentations, it's going to blow up even more. But it has been here all along. So this is not something that is going to happen suddenly. No, this is something that has been happening. It's going to get worse, but it's nothing new. So this is some simple but rather optimistic estimation that we did in our lab, that the percentage of elderly living below poverty levels, or near that, which is somewhere around, like, think about family income of around $30,000 a year. That's not poverty. You won't be homeless, but your living standard will be much lower than what you're used to. By 2045, so we don't have that much time, 22 million people will, 22 additional million people will live in that state. That's an increase of around 25%. That's huge. And that's going to have severe implications for our society. Living in poverty is difficult, but people can somehow survive. People can be happy, even if they are not doing great. But what hurts the most is when you're used to some living standard and suddenly it disappears. Suddenly you have to lower yourself, you have to downsize, you have to change, and you will have this sense of loss. That's what's hurting the most these days. You see that, you have seen that in recent elections, not just here, all over the world. People who were doing better, now they are still doing fine. They are doing in most cases, even better than average. But because they have experienced this fall in living standards, they are unhappy, they are angry. And I will show you. Because they don't know who to blame, this anger can be directed towards anything. And that's a social disaster. That's one of our most important challenges. But let me show you why this is happening. Well, you have some ideas already. You know that people have trouble saving for retirement and preparing for retirement. You work with people directly, so you don't have to depend on data like I do. You don't have to depend on numbers. You face people in real life, and you have a better experience, and that's what I'm here to learn from you, to see what's going on. I try to have a broader view about retirement system in general, and I try to place individuals there in the system. So I'm trying to see what's happening through the life cycle. And as you already know, the population is aging, so these problems are going to get worse. And my focus is mostly on downward mobility, so declining standards of living. Okay. So this is how our retirement system works. You have Social Security. Social Security benefits are the major source of income for most households in retirement. Social Security is going to face some serious challenges, but it's not impossible to fix. And it's important for all income levels. The replacement rate you get from Social Security benefits is somewhere, for most households, is somewhere between 35 to 40%. So, you know, if you retire and you don't have anything else, you will at least have like 40% of pre-retirement income. And that's what lifts most people out of poverty. And that was the initial thought behind Social Security when it was first established, to prevent the poverty among elderly as much as possible. And it has done a great job for us. On the top of that, to have an addition to Social Security benefits, we have workplace retirement plans. We used to have pensions. Now, gradually, we are replacing that with individual accounts, 401ks. And of course, not everyone had access to pensions. And now, not everyone has access to a 401k plan or something similar to that. And very few people have private assets that they can use in retirement. And of course, many people have trouble managing that. And that's another part of the story. My focus is going to be on workplace retirement plans because that's the part of the system which is letting us down a little bit. And we have to try to fix that as much as we can. Of course, we don't have such a thing as a perfect system. Every system has its flaws. The same way that every individual has their flaws. But our job is to come up with a plan that works better than the system we have already and works for more people and is more inclusive. So what's happening? We know about aging already. But at the same time, we have this change in the structure of society. The structure of family is changing. Families are getting smaller. Children are more dependent on parents. It used to be the other way around. So people used to have kids, because they thought when they get old, the kids will take care of them. That's not happening anymore. To be honest, when I see the way my generation is treating our parents, I get afraid a little bit about my future and having children. I have this ongoing argument with my brother about how much we are responsible for the well-being of our parents. And it's unbelievable. I can't even digest some of the stuff that I'm hearing from my own family. And then I go out and listen to other people. And to be honest, I kind of depend on my parents still. Not financially, I'm independent, but for a sense of security mostly. You know, I know if something happens to me, they are there for me. That's scary. So, family is changing fast. Our relationship with our employer is changing fast. So there was a time that people would get a job on a manufacturing plant. They would live all their life working there, getting raises, establishing a relationship, being part of a union. And when they were done in retirement, they would still get support from that community, from that firm. Of course, not everyone had that opportunity, but those who had, again, they would get this sense of security and support from their employer and from their union. That's not the case anymore. People are changing jobs faster. Employers want a more flexible labor market. They want to be able to hire and fire whenever they want to. They want to lower the cost as much as possible. And unions, they don't really exist. They still play a huge role in some sectors, but they're much smaller than what they used to be, and they're much weaker. So as a result of that, we have declining in bargaining power of the labor. So wages have been stagnant for a long time. Since 80s, the real wage for most people has not increased at all. We have periods that we are doing better. We have periods that we are doing worse. On average, wages have been stagnant, and families are not doing better than they used to years ago. But on the other side, when we see wages, we don't see the benefits attached to it. The benefits are also disappearing. So when you switch from a traditional pension to a 401k system, you are shifting all the responsibility and the cost of taking care of that to workers, to individuals. So employers are very happy. Employees are also happy because at the same time, when they take the responsibility, they feel like they have options. They are more in control. I don't know how much they're in control because of lack of education, because they're not prepared. That stresses them out. These are the things that we have heard about a lot. But at the same time, again, while this risk has been transferred to employees, we think that, okay, now it's cheaper for employers to provide pension plans. And if it's cheaper, maybe they can raise wages. It's not really happening. So the retirement plan coverage has been flat. It actually declined during crisis. It's bouncing back a little bit, but still it's lower than what it used to be years ago. So the promises are, okay, you have lower cost plans. 401ks are much cheaper than a pension, much easier to manage. So you think that, okay, over time, you should have universal coverage. No, never happened. It never really increased. Initially, it wasn't increased till late 90s, but then it went down and never came back. So 35% of older workers still don't have any retirement plans at work. It's much worse for younger people, and as I will show you, it's not equal for everyone. So one promise, increasing coverage, didn't really happen. And this is just coverage. So when you have a pension, when you had a traditional pension, your contribution was kind of fixed because that's something that employer would put to your account or in the pension fund. But now, many of these accounts are actually empty. So people are covered, but they are not able to save. They don't know how to save. So they end up with empty accounts. So when we say the coverage is the same, it doesn't mean that the preparedness is the same. No, it's not. People are actually doing worse because they are not really saving. There are, of course, some advantages. These retirement plans are more mobile. Before, if you worked in a job with a pension and you lost that job, you would lost the pension, everything would be gone. I mean, you could keep a little bit of the benefits, but the vesting schedule is different. So if you quit the job early, if you lose the job early, you would lose a lot of money from your pension. Now, because it's in your account, you can transfer it anywhere else, but that's not really helping because of lack of coverage. Also, when people change jobs, many of them, because they don't know how to roll over to an IRA, or they cannot pick the right IRA, they end up in a high-fee plan. And some of financial advisors are not very helpful. Because of lack of a fiduciary role, people end up in horrible plans that cost them a lot, and they lose lots of savings. So it has delivered some advantages, but we have lost something. And we have to fix it. There is no going back to traditional pensions. It's not possible. We have a gig economy these days. Jobs are changing. Very soon enough, 50% of people will be self-employed. The thing is, we have to fix this system and prepare for that situation where there is no going back, and we have to find a new way for retirement savings and retirement income in general. So this is the situation right now. If you are in the bottom 20% of workers, we are not talking about unemployed families, we are not talking about those who are on benefits, we are only talking about workers. So bottom 20% of income earners depend solely on Social Security. There is some wealth. Some have houses that they can afford to sell and downsize and rely on personal wealth. Only 3% actually get 3% of the total income is coming from pensions and retirement plans. Most of it, 83%, is coming from Social Security. And that's how important it is for people. Even when you go to the middle income groups, middle 20%, still 65% of income is coming from Social Security. And only 17% of income is coming from retirement plans. And it's not, this doesn't say that people have 17% of their income individually from retirement plans. No, that's not true. What it shows is that most people don't have retirement plans. So on average, you get something like 17% of total income from retirement plans. This is very small. And it's only the highest income earners, the top 20%, that have enough wealth to rely on in retirement. So very small group, relatively. And even amongst them, when I look at the data, many of them don't really have much. So again, that group disappears when you get the average, but a large share of them don't have retirement savings. So you may think that, oh, okay, they have assets. They can survive. The thing is, many people with money make many stupid decisions and end up having nothing. So my parents both retired around 10 years ago. they both had generous pensions, but my father still wanted to work, so he started his own business. My mother insisted that we have separate funds. So my mom was a teacher. She doesn't really know much about the market or investment or risk. So she's much more conservative than my father. My father tries to jump from business to business, take advantage of every opportunity he finds. And he was the top engineer of the firm he was working for. He has 30 years of experience in management. And he's managing his portion of money. And I let you guess who has lost more money. So sometimes it's better if you know you don't know much. So this is the picture. But in bottom 20% of family income earners, people have zero. Most people have absolutely nothing. Middle 40%, our middle class, most of them have less than $60,000 in retirement accounts. When you annuitize it, and I did that generously. I gave them a 5% real return, so no inflation, and it still turns out something like $3,000 per month. So this is a very, very small addition to your Social Security. And even top 10%, these are the people that we hear about in elections. Top 10% have gained everything. Even these people, most of them have less than $200,000 in their retirement accounts, which is, again, generously, it turns to something like $1,000 a month, which is a lot of money. But relatively speaking, when you look at their life standards, it's going to hit them. So people offer different solutions that are not really solutions. We call them myth. So one, people should save more. People should save more. I agree, if they can. And many people can afford saving more. I'm not disputing that. Will that save the problem? Not necessarily. Will that save the problem for everyone? Not necessarily. I'm going to show that later. Number two, people should work longer. Yes. I mean, nobody wants to work as just working. Like, if we can afford to do whatever we do, we won't choose to work. Even if we love our jobs, we don't want to call it work. You know, work by definition is something we do for money. Of course, if we're lucky and have a job that we love, that's great. But anyways, anyone who is willing to work and is able to work in old ages must be able to work. We are not going to dispute that. But is working longer a solution to not having resources in retirement? No. I'm going to show why not. And we have all sorts of like home equity and other things that people say people should save in retirement. It's very difficult. First of all, people don't have much in home equity. Like the median home equity for people is somewhere around $150,000. So most people have less than $150,000. And when you think about it, it's a house you bought many years ago. So when you sell it, you will have capital gains on that. It will be taxed. and you have to buy another thing. You have to pay the agent. So you will lose a huge share of that. And you will end up with something around 100K, which is great. But even that is not going to solve the problem for many people. You still have to live somewhere. Renting is an option. It doesn't provide you with much security. My rent has increased during the past 5 years from $1,200 to $1,500. I live in a very small apartment in not a very nice neighborhood. But even there, it's true. It's Brooklyn. I often say the greatest thing about Brooklyn is the size of the rats on the street. But even there, we have this huge increase in rent. Of course, it's not everywhere. But renting doesn't provide you with much security. At any point, you might be out. BBC ran this story around a year ago about homelessness in old ages in New York City, and it was devastating. And of course, if you want to just downsize and buy a smaller house, from $100,000, you will end up with $50,000 for actual consumption. And there is a number 4 here that I didn't even write down because people say, and they are very loud when they say it, people say, in old ages, you don't need much money. I'm not going to talk about that. You know better than that. So you have seen this in the previous presentation, more or less the same structure. So the red line is a perfect life, the income in a perfect life, and the yellow one is savings. So this is what most of my economist friends imagine when they think about retirement and when they do their calculations to come up with cute solutions. So imagine someone, let's say Richard, starting to work at age 22, making $40,000 a year, in a good job, with a good employer. So I let Richard have raises like 3% a year, real, without inflation, which is great. And with an employer who matches. So Richard manages to save 10% of his income every year. So he gets raises until he's 65. At 65, he decides to work part-time, so 50%. And he starts to consume a little bit less, let's say 75% of pre-retirement income. It's not difficult because you don't have to go to work. There are work-related expenses that you don't have to pay. Let's say that's all right. People say that you don't need that much money. When you go through academic papers or some policy recommendations, people say that, oh, you need only 60%, you need only 50%. These are not real numbers. Your healthcare is going to increase. The cost of healthcare is crazy, and it's going to go even higher. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that part. You know better than that. So let's say he manages to cut down expenses to 75%. So he can still save. So if you claim Social Security and you work part-time, you might be still able to save money. So somewhere around 80, he decides that, okay, I'm not going to work longer. Not for money, at least. So he starts consuming what he has saved in the retirement account. And when he's 100, he still has $100K left. This is a nice picture. And this is feasible. But this is not a real life. We know that already. So let's say this is life of Brian. And it's more real than Richard. So Brian starts working at the same job, but at 25, he gets laid off. He doesn't have money. He's new. He hasn't saved much. And he has to move to another city to get a new job. So he cashes out all the retirement savings. He consumes most of it, let's say half. Finds an even better job. Let's say moving from New York to Chicago, gets a better job. Again, 3% raises every year with a good match, starts accumulating wealth. It goes up. And then there's a market crash. So the account balance goes down. Because he's young, he's advised to invest only in equity to get higher returns, which is a good advice. But when there's a crash, you lose a lot. He remains unemployed for a year because the recovery takes time. He gets a new job, not that great, not that much of raises every year. He's lucky. The new employer also offers a plan, lower matching. So instead of saving 10%, he goes down to saving only 6%. Until he's 65. When he realizes that he cannot work anymore because of health conditions, or he keeps looking for a job for 2 years and he cannot find anything, and he just gives up. Around 50%. It changes from year to year. It's higher when we are going through economic downturns. It's lower when the economy is doing well. But on average, around 50% of people retire without planning it. So they retire because they got fired and they couldn't get a new job and they gave up, or because they have health problems, or because they have to take care of someone. So you cannot decide, you cannot plan how long you're able to work. At some point, you have to stop. So because he knows he doesn't have much money, he cuts his expenses to just 55%. It's already a huge hit. But still, he runs out of money at age 82. The truth is, he may not live that long. But that's not good news either. So we wrote a paper based on that. And it's shocking, the response that we got, that isn't that normal that people in low-income families get sick more, or get fired more, or even get more divorces? So it sounded natural to some people, but I don't think there is anything normal or natural about this. This is something we have to keep in mind, that people have very different life experiences. So if you are low income, you already have a harder time saving money. Your employer is likely not offering anything. Low income workers have much lower coverage rate. Only around 30% of them have retirement plans at work, compared to the overall 65%. So they already have problems on the saving side. And then you see they experience much higher time out of labor force, and they have much more problems. And keep that in mind. When you lose your job and you need money, when you get sick and you need money, if you're doing well, you have backup plans, you have better credit, you have better networks, better families who can help you to go through the periods of unemployment or sickness. But if you're low income, it's much more likely that you don't have any backup plan other than your retirement plan. So that's when they cash out. That's when they have withdrawals. And that's what's hurting them a lot. I'm not going to focus much on race, not because race is not important, but because race, gender, and income group, they interact a lot. So you have a different story if you're a female black worker in a low-income job than a male black worker in a high-income group. The life experience is very different, and each of these groups have very specific industries they can find job in. So when we talk about the wage gap, this 82% number is usually calculated considering that people work in the same jobs. It's very difficult for women or minorities to get the exact same job as like white men, let's say. There are specific industries. In Brooklyn, like most of the delis are run by Yemenis families. They have a network. They know the provider. They know how to run the business. They have this huge network that they're taking advantage of. So your network, who you know, who your family member is, decides your career path to a huge extent. So if you happen to have a weaker network, your opportunity to actually get a good job is much lower. So that's why you see the huge difference in coverage rates. And it's mostly because they have, sorry, the bars seem a bit off, but anyways. The main reason is that people go to different industries, different occupations. That's why some of them have better coverage, some of them don't. And that prevents many people from saving. Again, even for the more, even for people who are doing better, like white middle class, the coverage rate is not great. So it's a race for doing worse. I'm not saying some people are doing good, some people are doing bad. No, 50% coverage, 59% coverage is not a good number. And then we give people incentives to save, but we are giving the incentives to wrong people. So we are giving a lot of incentives. 14% of our tax expenditure is going to people who don't really need retirement savings. And I'm not showing you this because of some like socialist ideology or anything. I'm just saying we are going to encourage people to save. That's what we try to do. So we are going to spend this money. We have to spend it wisely. We have to put the money where it has the most effect. If we want to prevent having a large portion of population in poverty, we have to fix this. We have to encourage people who need the savings more to save more. So this is not really working. Okay, going back to the jobs story, working in old age. Again, you have these different industries that people are engaged with. And when you get older, it's very difficult to change your industry. Not impossible, but very difficult for most people. So this is the racial disparity in physical effort for work in old ages. So these are people over 50. And we are asking them how much physical effort your job requires. It's getting better in some aspects. So overall speaking, jobs need less physical efforts. So they are more suitable for old ages when your physical strength may decline. But still, 50% of black people are working in jobs that require lots of physical effort. And it's not going down. So it's going down for some groups, but not for everyone. The story is the same for women. So women are entering the labor force more and more every year, but there are not that many good jobs. So they end up getting jobs that require lots of bending and lifting heavy weights. And in old ages, that's what cut your life shorter, when you have to stress yourself too much. Another story. Older workers don't really move for finding new jobs. If you have to work, and you need to work, you start looking for jobs near you. It's not that easy to move from New York to Chicago when you're 6 years old. Again, not impossible, but you lose your community. You lose your connection. You want to live near your family. For me, I changed country. It's fine. I'm young. I will learn. I will make new friends. If you're old, you can do it, sure. But do I expect my parents to learn a new language and change the whole living conditions? No, not really. It's very difficult. What's the result? Your options are limited. When you have limited options, you're more likely to land in a bad job, in a low-paying job, in a job that stresses you too much and is not very reliable. So this is something that is happening right now to older workers. If we are going to talk about the future, we should keep it in mind that if we do nothing about this, it's going to get worse. We are already working too long in this country compared to the other OECD countries. Let's just look at high-income countries and see how many years people have in retirement. Some of them, okay, Italy and Japan, it's because they live too long. But compared to other countries that have more or less similar life expectancy, people in the United States are working more and spending less time in retirement. If they don't have money, maybe that's not a bad idea. But again, this is not the standard we want to set. This is not what we are going to aim for. And this is why I'm saying they live less, partially because they are earning less and they have less money. If you don't see a future for yourself, the despair and the shame gets you. It cuts your life shorter. So it's hard to look at people's wealth because they hide it. They don't really tell you correctly, or they can't tell you correctly how much they have. And income can come one year, goes the other year. So the best measure to see the living standard of an individual, the best proxy is usually education, years in education. It tells you a lot when you know how many years people have spent in education. It tells you a lot about their wealth, their income, and their living standards. Mostly, and it's not because if you are better educated, you have a better job. It's partially because of that, but also it means you're from a better family, you're from a better neighborhood. So it's a very good proxy, not just for income, but for everything that has happened to you through life. So when you look at that, you will see that this increase in longevity hasn't been equal. So people who are not doing well financially because of healthcare, because of stress, and many other reasons, they have gained much less in longevity than people who are doing better. And again, these 5.5 years That's the difference in longevity between those who were born in 1920s and those who were born in 1940s. So this is the observed one. This is not about projections. This is what has actually happened again. The number that we have to aim for is 5.5. So we are not going to say, oh, we just need a more equal society. No, it's not about equality. It's about seeing what's hurting people and trying to fix that. And of course, there is change in retirement times over time. But there is also differences in retirement time you will have if you are prepared and doing well financially, or if you don't have enough for retirement. So low-income men have 2 years less in retirement on average, partially because their life expectancy is lower, and partially because they cannot work as long as high-income men. So if they lose their job when they're 57, it is very difficult for them to find a job. Time in unemployment for older workers is, first of all, much longer than younger workers. So those who lost their jobs in crisis, younger people took them a year to find a new job. For older workers, it was much, much longer, and many of them gave up because they felt like they can never get another job. So that's a quite recent experience. It was 10 years ago. But it still applies. Nothing has changed. And yes, there is the difference between men and women. Women have more chance to have a longer retirement, but again, they have less savings. Their retirement plan coverage is higher for women, fortunately, because they work in sectors that provide plans more again. But they don't have much in it, given that they are living longer. And again, if here, instead of Brian, you have Mary, you will see that there are way more interruptions and the accumulation is more difficult. But fortunately, this is already done, so I don't have to go through that. So the point I want to make here is that it's very, very important for people to know how to go through life, to be educated well, to be able to make the right decision. But we have to acknowledge that sometimes it's too much to expect from people. If the system is letting us down, if the labor market is discriminating against some people, if employers are failing to provide retirement plans, it's not right to put all the blame on the individual and saying that individuals are flawed, saying that individuals are not educated. Individuals should be educated. I know that because I teach in a college, and I wish my students knew how to do math. And I wish my student knew a little bit about finance. They know almost nothing. I try to tell them about these things. They're not even interested because they don't see the big picture. So that takes most of my time in my class, just to tell them that, hey, this is important. The same thing applies to my dad. I try to tell him not to make risky investments. He doesn't listen. Because I'm his son, doesn't matter what kind of degrees I have? No. You're a kid. So I wish one of you could talk to him. So it's very important for us to empower individuals. to give them the right to work, to give them the knowledge to how to invest and accumulate for their retirement. But unless we fix the system, it's not going to help. You cannot insure yourself. You cannot just save enough money to pay for your cancer treatment if, God forbid, someday you have it. You need health insurance. You need to pool your resources to be able to overcome that sort of extreme conditions. And people have that. So we do offer unemployment insurance. That's a huge help for people, for those who don't want to tap into your retirement accounts. It varies state by state. A recent study is going to be published in one of the top economic journals done at Berkeley. It shows that states that offer better unemployment insurance, they are doing much better during the downturns. And individuals also are doing much better because they don't have to tap into these resources that are designed for something completely different. It's like you cut your health insurance to fix your car. Yes, it will fix your car, but then you are risking something else. And this is a risk. Retirement is a risk that is a thing that is going to happen for us for sure, or at least we hope to. We don't want to die before retirement. So this is something certain, and we are not prepared for it. Many are not. And that's the real challenge. And that's why we need to, first of all, be open about that. We had some focus groups about that. We talked to people. And the thing is, because we always talk about financial education and empowering individuals, which is very important. Again, I'm not saying this is not. But because we have this approach to retirement, when they don't have enough savings, they don't want to talk about it because they are ashamed of themselves. Because they think it's their fault. It is probably their fault. They shouldn't have bought that huge red SUV with their retirement savings, but not everyone is doing that. Most people don't have money because they don't have any opportunities to save. Unemployment is something that happens whether or not you are well-educated and hardworking or not. Economic crisis eats up your retirement saving suddenly, and you have no control over that. And you cannot insure yourself individually. The cost is too high. You can never save enough to overcome some of these big challenges, and we need an insurance. Social Security is doing a great job covering the bases. We need something on the top of that for sure. And we want to tell people, while they have to do better, while they have to know more, there is no shame when the system lets them down. So unless they are able to talk about it and see what is going wrong from time to time, they take it to themselves. They think it's their fault, and that eats them up. So I think this is your job, while empowering them, while giving them the knowledge how to steer this complex system, to tell them that sometimes it's not your fault. And allow them to talk about it. And maybe we can find better solutions. As a community, we can find better ways of insuring ourselves against these huge risks that we are going to face. And I want to hear from you. I know we may have different options when it comes to policy and how to address these issues. It's very hard to agree. We agree that everyone should work. People, politicians, economists disagree on how we should provide that opportunity. But we agree on the principle. So let's agree on the principle that we need security in retirement. And part of it is something that individuals cannot handle. Not because they are not educated, just because the risk is too high. We agree about cancer and healthcare. So maybe we should think about retirement in the same way, to some extent. And I'm looking forward to our discussions and our individual conversations, because that's why I'm here. I'm not here to set the values. I'm here to get the values from you. So somebody here So this society in general has to agree on where we want to be. And then me as an economist has some tools, some goal, some target, and then I can go and find a way to get there. But before agreeing on the general concept of what's happening, how different people are facing very, very different sides of this retirement issue, retirement crisis. They have very different experiences. If we don't agree on that and try to picture everyone as Richard, if we think of everybody as this guy, we can never find a solution. It's important to know there is difference between individual experiences based on gender, based on race, based on income, where you grew up, which state, which city, which part of the city. And then we can have a discourse and discussion and come with a solution. Thank you.